Alright, I've gotten a lot of requests to show how I do my woven body golden stonefly. So that's what we're going to do today. I've got a size 10 heavy, 2x heavy, size 10 curved nymph hook in the vise, and I'm using UTC 70 in brown. I use the UTC specifically for this pattern because it lays flat, and we're going to be tying in quite a few materials when we get up to the thorax, so you know, something that lays flat will give you a few extra thread wraps without really affecting your fly much, and that's going to be really important because once we get to the thorax there's going to be a lot of things that we want to get tied in. And what I first want to do is I want to kind of set the groundwork for building up the body portion of this. I'm going to do some of the building up with thread wraps, but most of the building is not going to be done with thread, because with thread, obviously when you're building a body with thread wraps, it's doing it uniformly all the way around the shank. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that my body is built out to the sides, a lot more similar to the flat profile of a stonefly. And what I'm doing here is I'm looking at about the halfway point, which is about right where my thread is right now. And I'm going to build up a little bit of some thread bulk there, and I'm going to cover the wire from there back. And the reason why I do that is because I'm setting the stage for where I'm going to start and stop my thorax. So anything above where there's no thread, that's going to be thorax. Everything behind it is going to be body. This is a piece of yarn from a craft store, and this is a pretty irrelevant piece of material as far as the color and all that goes. All I'm doing with this, and you can use anything for this, I've even used pieces of mono, you can use that too. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this specific material, but what I'm doing is I'm tying that in specifically on the side of the hook shank. And then I'm going to do that on the other side. Just kind of hold it there as you make a loose wrap and then tighten it a little bit. The reason why I want it on the side is what I said a minute ago about how everything I do for the body is based on building that bulk off to the side to make that, you know, that stonefly profile. Stoneflies are wide and flat. And I'm going to hold this out. I'm going to hold my material out with my fingers so that as I tie it down the shank, that it stays on the side and doesn't wrap around. And what you also want to do is when you get to the back, you can see how there's a little bit of thread left over. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut the excess off now. And the reason why I do that early is because this is a pretty bulky material. And if you wait until you get all the way to the bottom, you're guaranteed to have a little bit of excess and you won't be able to cover it up. So by stopping a little bit ahead of time, it gives you the opportunity to cover all that up and hide it. That last little bit sometimes can be tough, but number of thread wraps here don't matter. Just keep going with it until it's covered. Okay, and as I come up, I want to make sure that I leave this part on the side of the hook. It's a light material, so if you're not holding it there, it could easily slide around on you. Get rid of that. Okay, now that's what that looks like. Now we're not going to do all of our, you know, bodybuilding with that. We're still going to take some other materials that we're going to tie in and tie them in the same way. All right. Now, next order of business is the tail. Stoneflies do not have big, long tails like a lot of mayfly nymphs. They've got shorter, stubbier little, you know, two little things sticking off the back. Most stonefly patterns, obviously, that's mimicked with biots, which is exactly what I'm going to use. So these are two rusty brown biots. One thing I really hate tying in are these things. All the years I've been tying, I'm still not very good at it. I still do them one by one. I see a lot of videos where, you know, people do them at the same time, but I don't know, I just don't work well with biots. Now, stonefly tails, you know, they only have two prongs, and they're not very long, so you don't really need these things sticking that far off the back of your fly. Just a nice short little stubby Stubby tail coming off the back is what we're looking for. Nothing crazy. Just even it up. And I always hold it on the other side until I get it secured. And then you also get the added benefit of tying that in, of going up the shank and having another material ride up the side of the shank, continuing to build that body that we're looking for. Good. Okay, now for the body itself, I'm going to use a cool material. It's brown and like a light gold. It's called embroidery floss, and you can get this right from the craft store. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this fly with two colors. If you ever look at a golden stonefly, yes, obviously they're golden, but if you look at the wing casing of them, they've got a lot of brown in them and they're not gold on top. And the underside and the rest of them is where the gold comes in. So that's what I'm going to do. The color that you want on top, in this case it's going to be our brown because that's the color of our wing casing. Whatever color you want on top of your fly, you tie it in on the hook shank closest to you. So closest to me is going to be the brown. Obviously closest to the camera is going to be the gold. And you got to make sure that they're tied in on the sides. Now, the reason why I say color is because I tie these things in all kinds of different colors. I do a purple and white for steelhead. I do a golden stone. I do a regular black stonefly. I do brown. I do rusty. You know, so I tie this pattern in a lot of different colors. It's a fantastic pattern, big time fish catcher, and it's probably, I would say, my primary fly for my lead fly on my double nymph rigs when I indicator nymph. So this fly is something I tie a lot of because I always have it in my box. And in the beginning, getting some of the little nuances of this fly down might be a little tedious, but I'll tell you right now, once you get the hang of it, it's a really, really quick, easy fly to tie, and I'll tell you, it's really, really effective. All right, now I'm going to whip finish, and I'm going to get that right off of there. I'm pulling my thread right out, and I'm going to show you how I do the body. So I'm going to need a second to turn my vise and make sure the focus is good. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our two colors here, and whatever color you want on top is tied in on the one side. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our two fibers, whatever color you want on top, you're going to put behind the other color. So we want brown on top, so we're going to put brown behind the gold. And all you're going to do is just tie a simple overhand knot, no different than if you were tying your shoe. That's all. Just the first step of tying your shoe. Now, I could easily cinch this knot tight right now, but what I'm going to do instead is see this little piece of brown right here? I'm just going to separate that from the gold, and I'm just going to place the brown on top of the hook. And once the brown's on top of the hook, I'm just going to pull that tight, and I'm good. And there's my first knot. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same exact thing. I want brown on top, so brown goes behind the gold, and I'm going to loop that through as if I was tying my shoe. And before I pull it tight, I'm just going to take the brown and I'm just going to set the brown on top of the hook, leave the gold on the bottom, and I'm good to go. Okay, now that I've done that, I've got a piece of gold on each side when I'm looking down at my body. So every time you tie one of these knots, you get a piece of segmentation on one side of the hook. So if you want to tie a fly with, say, 5 segmentations, you're going to have to make 10 knots. If you want 8 segmentations, you're going to need 4 knots, and so on. And once you get the hang of it and you get going with this, it goes really quick, and it's a really easy body to make. I know woven bodies are pretty universally known as being a pain in the butt, but if you do them this way, really, really fast, really easy, and man, are they cool flies. Not only are they effective, but they just look cool. I think it's a perfect way to do a stonefly. Love the way these look. Okay, so last one I'll do here. Brown color on top goes behind. You're going to make the knot as if you're tying your shoe. You're going to rest the color you want on top of the hook, and you are going to pull it tight. Now I'm going to do the rest of the body because, you know, we don't need to keep filming every one. Okay, so I finished the body, and that's what we have. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 segmentations, so it took me 8 knots. There's the underside, and that's the way that it should look, nice and flat, sticking outwards. exactly what you're looking for. So now what we're going to do is reintroduce our thread. It's just a lot easier to do the body if the thread is just not there. And once you tighten these knots, the knots kind of clamp right down on themselves, so you don't lose the work. So getting your thread right off the hook is a nice way of making sure you got everything out of your way. So now what we're going to do is a nice loose wrap just to get that locked in. Make sure that it's secured, and then we'll go with some tight wraps, make sure that that's really secure, not going anywhere. We'll flip our thread over. We'll get the gold secured as well. Get that tied down. And once you get a few wraps to get everything good to go, we're going to snip that off, and our body is basically done. Now, that's the first half of the fly. The second half is the thorax, which includes our wing casing, our dubbing, all that kind of stuff. Plus our legs. So this is really the same process again and again. It's just a little tedious at times. What I use for the wing case is I use brown Swiss straw. I like the little sheen that it gives off. I mean, on this fly you can use anything for the wing case. I've used turkey before, which is a popular stonefly wing case material. You can use anything you want. On this fly, I really like the Swiss straw, and that's what I usually use on it. But again, when you tie one, you can use anything you want. They come out really, really nice. Now for the legs, that's another material where you can use a number of different things. I've certainly tied these with sili legs. I've tied these with partridge. I've tied these with a number of different things. I've grown to like biots for legs. So I take the curved part of the biot and I make sure that it's sticking outwards, and I line that up with the second segmentation of my body, hold it tight, and tie that in. And the segmentation is kind of cool because you can use it to measure your materials, make sure everything is where you want it and the same. So get a loose wrap and then we'll cinch it right down. Whoops, caught one of them. The back legs I make a little bit smaller, the front ones I'll do a little bit bigger. And from here on out, we're basically just going to do the same thing again and again. Now for dubbing, I don't have a company or anything. I just use this simple golden stonefly dubbing. It's fine. I think it's actually a dry fly dubbing, but tease it out, it works just fine for nymphs, no problem at all. And what you're going to have to do is put quite a bit on here. I'm going to pause this while I get that. Alright, it's just a lot of downtime in the video while I'm, wrapping dubbing and putting it on the dubbing noodle. So stoneflies, as they go down towards the head, they begin to build some bulk. So I like to mimic that as well. One of the things that I also like to do is I have my bodkin here. One of my bodkins does not have a curve on the end of it. And what I do is I take that and I put it right behind the dubbing. Just place it there, fold your wing case over the top of the dubbing, mash it down with your finger, and pull the bodkin out. What that does is that gives you a really nice, neat fold over. Makes your wing case look really, really nice, not all over the place, and snip that off. Now, I snip it off every single time. As soon as you snip that off, you're going to have to put your wing case right back on because we're going to do 3 segments here of wing case. But I just find it's easier. You build up so much bulk if you fold it over and keep it tied on. So I like to cut it right off. All right, now this middle section is where the stonefly is at its beefiest. So I mimic that with some extra dubbing. So I'm going to really pile on this dubbing and pause it while I do that. Alright, didn't want to just sit there with downtime while I dubbed my noodle there. As I said before, this middle section is the section that gets the most heft to it, I guess you can say. So I like to, I might have even used a little too much, but that's fine. Okay, we're going to use the same process. We're going to take our bodkin, put it right behind the dubbing. We're going to fold that wing case over and secure it. Okay, now we are going to put legs on this. It is going to get legs. It's also going to get antenna. I don't put legs on the middle section of wing case. I put the legs on in the last section. And also, you can with this fly put the antenna on right away, tuck it under the bead and tie it on that way. That's more than fine. I've done that before, but you know, as I tie more and more of these, I just kind of like the look of the antenna sitting on the outside of the bead. So that's generally what I do. Alright, now we're going to tie in the front section, which you can see obviously there's some excess, and I did that on purpose because if I cut that off with my scissors, I'm going to get a bunch of material. Alright, I wanted to pause that like I did before with get the dubbing on there. But yeah, I tied that off with a razor blade so that you don't get all that excess. And we'll back that up over the top a little bit. And we're good. Now, this is with this being the last part of the wing case, this is where I'm going to put my last legs on and my antenna. I'm going to do that the same way. Curved part pointing out. Gotta cinch those in there. Nah, I'm not a fan of that. What'll happen sometimes is if there's a space behind the bead, it'll flare your legs out. So you want to make sure that those are filled in. Alright, that's a little better. Get one on, measure the other side, and look right down at it, make sure it's the right length. We're good. Get the excess off of there. Okay, now, same drill, bodkin, fold that over, and tighten. Now, what we're going to do here is the same thing as I did in the last step, is you don't really want to cut that with your scissors because you're going to have a bunch of excess, so I'm just going to slip a razor blade in there, snip it off, and the last thing you want to throw on there are a couple antennae. And we're just going to put those in right on the side here. Same way that we've been doing the legs, but obviously they're going to stick forward. Made them a little longer than I normally do, but that little extra sticking off can be a good attractor. Cut off your excess. Okay, now you got the thread wraps at the front, so obviously it's whip finish time, but what we're going to do is we're going to put some dubbing on here so that when I whip finish it, not only do you finish the fly, but you also cover those thread wraps. So we'll go 1, 2, 3 over the top, and we're good. Last thing I normally do is I'll tease out the bottom a little bit, make it a little more buggy, and that's it. That is your woven body golden stone. Great fly. Would highly recommend it.